The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, releasing a wave of cool, lavender-scented air onto the bustling city sidewalk. For a moment, the noise of traffic and hurried pedestrians faded, replaced by the quiet elegance of the Grand Chancellor Hotel. The lobby stretched out like a cathedral to luxury, floors of polished Italian marble that reflected the warm glow of crystal chandeliers, towering Corinthian columns, and fresh floral arrangements that must have cost more than most people's weekly salary. Elaine Hart stepped inside and felt the familiar shift in atmosphere that she had experienced 100 times before. It was subtle at first, the way conversations seemed to pause mid-sentence, the way heads turned ever so slightly in her direction, the way eyes lingered a beat too long before darting away. At 52 years old, Elaine had learned to read these moments the way a sailor reads the sky before a storm. She walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had built empires from nothing. Her charcoal-tailored blazer fit perfectly over matching trousers, and her designer bag, a discreet symbol of success for those who knew what to look for, hung from her shoulder with casual elegance. Her salt and pepper hair was styled in neat cornrows that framed a face marked by both wisdom and warmth. She wasn't just present in this space, she commanded it, even if no one realized it yet. The lobby didn't just notice her arrival, the lobby judged it. At the front desk, a young man in his mid-twenties straightened his already immaculate uniform. His name tag read Brandon, and his smile appeared automatically, professionally. The kind of smile trained into hospitality workers that never quite reaches their eyes. Behind him, two other staff members exchanged glances that spoke entire conversations without a single word. "Welcome to the Chancellor Hotel," Brandon said, his tone carrying that peculiar blend of formality and detachment reserved for guests who don't quite fit the mold. "Do you have a reservation?" Elaine approached the counter with the deliberate grace of someone who had nothing to prove and nothing to hide. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and steady, a voice used to boardrooms and negotiations. "Yes, under Elaine Hart." Brandon's fingers found the keyboard, but they hesitated there for just a fraction of a second too long. His eyes flicked from Elaine to the computer screen, then back to Elaine, then to the screen again. It was a small thing, that hesitation, a micro moment, but Elaine had learned to measure people in these tiny increments of doubt. "Ah, Ms. Hart," Brandon said after what felt like an eternity of tapping. His voice carried a faint edge now, as though he had discovered something unexpected. "You've booked a suite with us." He emphasized the word suite as if it required verification, as if the computer must have made an error, as if someone needed to double-check that Elaine Hart truly belonged in the premium accommodations of the Grand Chancellor. "Yes," Elaine replied simply. Her tone remained unwavering, offering nothing for him to grab onto. The check-in process stretched longer than necessary. Brandon typed with exaggerated precision, clicking and double-clicking, refreshing the screen, checking her identification against the reservation not once but 3 times. When he finally produced the key card, he held it for just a moment too long before extending it toward her. Their fingers brushed briefly across the marble counter, and Brandon actually flinched, a small, involuntary recoil that he tried to cover with a nervous laugh. "Enjoy your stay," he said, the words landing somewhere between a dismissal and a dare. Elaine offered a gracious smile, the kind that cost her nothing but revealed even less. She gathered her key card and turned toward the elevators, her heels clicking against the marble in a steady, unhurried rhythm. The sound echoed through the suddenly quiet lobby like a metronome counting down to something no one could yet predict. Behind her, before the elevator doors had even fully closed, the whispers began. They started low, like the hum of a refrigerator. But Elaine didn't need to hear the words to know exactly what was being said. She had heard it all before, in different hotels, different restaurants, different spaces where her presence was treated as an anomaly rather than an honor. Who does she think she is? Must be someone's assistant. Probably a mistake in the system. We'll have to check her out in the morning. The elevator rose slowly, each floor announced by a soft chime that seemed to mark the distance between who the staff thought she was and who she actually was. Elaine stared at her reflection in the polished brass doors and saw a woman who had weathered worse storms than this. A woman who had built a hospitality empire worth over $40 million. A woman who now owned 12 luxury properties across 3 continents, including the very hotel she was currently riding through. The doors opened onto the executive floor, and Elaine stepped into a hallway so quiet she could hear her own breathing. Room 1212 awaited her at the end of the corridor, the presidential suite, though Brandon hadn't bothered to mention that detail. She inserted the key card, pushed open the door, and walked into a space that most people only ever saw in magazines. Floor to ceiling windows revealed a glittering city skyline. A living area with plush furniture that probably cost more than a luxury car. A bedroom with sheets so soft they felt like water. A bathroom with marble that matched the lobby and a bathtub big enough for 2. Elaine set her bag down on the leather couch and walked to the window. Below her, the city sprawled in every direction, millions of lives intersecting in this one small corner of the world. She thought about the lobby, about Brandon's flinch, about the whispers that followed her to the elevator. None of it was new. None of it should still hurt, but it did, just a little, just enough. She took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was here. This wasn't just another business trip. This was reconnaissance. This was observation. This was the quiet work of understanding exactly what needed to change in her own empire. The Grand Chancellor Hotel was hers. She had purchased it 6 months ago as part of a broader initiative to create truly inclusive luxury spaces. But she had chosen to remain anonymous, wanting to see the property operate organically before she revealed herself. And what she had seen in just 5 minutes at the front desk told her more than any quarterly report ever could. Elaine picked up the phone to order room service. When she gave her room number, there was that pause again, that familiar hesitation on the other end of the line. She requested a light dinner and a pot of tea, thanked the voice on the other end, and hung up. Outside her window, the city lights began to flicker on as evening approached. Somewhere in this hotel, staff members were still whispering about the woman in the suite. Somewhere, assumptions were being made and judgments were being passed. They had no idea what was coming, but they would find out soon enough. The room service arrived exactly 23 minutes later. Elaine had been watching the city lights twinkle against the darkening sky, her mind wandering through the mental checklist of properties she needed to visit, when the knock came, soft, hesitant, as though the person on the other side wasn't quite sure they had the right door. She opened it to find a young woman in her early 20s, barely out of college by the look of her, clutching a silver tray with white-knuckled fingers. Her name tag read Maya, and her eyes widened slightly when she saw Elaine, as if she had been expecting someone else entirely. "Room service," Maya said, her voice pitched higher than necessary. She glanced past Elaine into the suite, her eyes scanning the living area, the bedroom doorway, the bathroom, anywhere but directly at Elaine's face. It was a quick scan, practiced, subtle, but Elaine caught it the way she caught everything. "Thank you," Elaine said, stepping aside to let her enter. "You can set it on the coffee table." Maya crossed the room with the careful steps of someone afraid to touch anything. She set the tray down, adjusted the teapot twice, and straightened the napkin even though it was already perfectly aligned. Her eyes continued their survey of the room, lingering on Elaine's designer bag on the leather couch, on the open laptop showing financial spreadsheets, on the suit jacket draped over the armchair. "Is there anything else you need?" Maya asked, her voice carrying that peculiar blend of politeness and suspicion that Elaine had grown to recognize over decades of navigating spaces not designed for her. "No, that will be all. Thank you, Maya." The young woman hesitated at the door, turning back as if she wanted to say something. Instead, she offered a tight smile and slipped out, closing the door behind her with exaggerated care. Elaine could almost hear her rushing back to the service elevator, probably heading straight to the break room to report what she had seen. The dinner was excellent. A light salad with grilled salmon, fresh bread, and a pot of jasmine tea that steamed gently in the quiet room. Elaine ate slowly, savoring the food but also savoring something else, the knowledge that tomorrow everything would change. The next morning, Elaine descended to the lobby for coffee. She had chosen her outfit carefully. A cream silk blouse paired with tailored navy trousers, gold earrings that caught the light, and low heels that still managed to click with authority against the marble floors. She looked, by any objective standard, like exactly who she was, a successful businesswoman enjoying a luxury hotel. The coffee bar occupied a sun-drenched corner of the lobby, all gleaming espresso machines and glass display cases filled with pastries that looked like edible art. Elaine ordered a cappuccino and a croissant, and the barista, a young man with sleeve tattoos and a friendly smile, processed her payment without incident. It was the guests who made the morning memorable. A group of 3 people near the window, a man in an expensive suit, a woman in business casual, and another woman who looked like she had just come from the gym, had stopped talking the moment Elaine approached the coffee counter. Their eyes followed her as she waited for her order, as she collected her cup, as she turned to find a seat. The man whispered something to the woman next to him. She responded without moving her lips, a faint smirk playing at the corner of her mouth. The third woman actually turned to stare openly, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. Elaine met her gaze directly, held it, watched the woman's face flush as she quickly looked away. She found a seat near the window, positioning herself where the morning sun warmed her skin, and sipped her cappuccino slowly. The conversation near her had resumed, but it was different now, quieter, more guarded, punctuated by glances that darted her way and then retreated. 10 minutes later, as Elaine was finishing her coffee, a hotel staff member approached the table. It was the front desk manager from the previous night, a woman in her 40s with sharp features and sharper eyes, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that seemed to match her demeanor. "Good morning," the manager said, her smile professionally calibrated. "I'm Sandra, the front desk manager. Just checking to ensure everything is satisfactory with your stay." Elaine recognized this for what it was, a wellness check. Someone had reported the black woman in the suite, and Sandra had been dispatched to verify that no problems were brewing. "Everything is lovely, thank you," Elaine replied, her tone warm but measured. Sandra's eyes swept over Elaine's outfit, her jewelry, her posture, cataloging details the way a detective catalogs evidence. "Wonderful. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out." She departed, but Elaine noticed her heading straight for the front desk, where Brandon and two other staff members immediately leaned in to hear whatever assessment she had to deliver. That afternoon, Elaine decided to visit the hotel's boutique shop. It was a small space off the main lobby, all glass shelves and soft lighting, featuring designer accessories that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. A silk scarf in deep burgundy had caught her eye through the window, hand-painted, French-made, the kind of piece that would complete an outfit beautifully. The clerk inside was a woman perhaps 60, with silver hair swept into an elegant chignon and reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up as Elaine entered, and her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Welcome," the clerk said, her voice carrying no warmth whatsoever. She stepped out from behind the counter and positioned herself at an angle that allowed her to follow Elaine's movements while pretending to straighten a display of handbags. Elaine moved toward the scarves, her fingers reaching for the burgundy silk. Before she could touch it, the clerk's voice cut through the quiet shop. "That's quite an expensive piece." The words hung in the air like smoke. Elaine turned slowly, her expression calm, her eyes meeting the clerk's with the kind of steady gaze that made lesser people uncomfortable. "It's lovely," Elaine said simply. "I'll take it." The clerk blinked, clearly not expecting that response. She hesitated, then nodded quickly, fumbling her way behind the counter to ring up the purchase. Her hands shook slightly as she processed the transaction, and when Elaine handed over her black credit card, the kind that didn't have a spending limit, the clerk's eyes widened just enough to notice. "Would you like it gift-wrapped?" the clerk asked, her tone entirely different now, softer, almost apologetic. "No, thank you, I'll wear it." Elaine draped the scarf around her neck, letting the silk settle against her collar, and walked out of the shop without looking back. Behind her, she could feel the clerk's eyes following her all the way to the elevator. By evening, the accumulation of small moments had begun to weigh on her. The double takes, the hesitation, the scanning eyes, the whispered comments disguised as conversation. None of it was overt enough to confront directly. None of it was violent or threatening. It was simply the steady drip of being treated as an outsider in a space she technically owned. Elaine sat in her suite, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, and made a decision. She had come here to observe, and she had observed enough. Tomorrow she would address the issue directly. Tomorrow she would request a meeting with the owner. They would laugh at that request, she knew. They would exchange amused glances and polite deflections. They would tell her the owner was unavailable, unreachable, too important to meet with a guest who had a complaint. And then she would tell them the truth. Elaine picked up the phone and dialed the concierge. When a voice answered, she spoke calmly, clearly, with the authority of someone who had spent decades learning exactly how to be heard. "This is Elaine Hart in the presidential suite. I need to arrange a meeting with the owner of the hotel tomorrow morning. Please let the management know." There was a pause on the other end. A long pause, then, I'll see what I can do, Ms. Hart." Elaine hung up and walked to the window. Below her, the city gleamed with a million lights, each one representing a life, a story, a collection of small moments and larger decisions. Somewhere in this building, staff members were probably discussing her request, speculating about who she was and what she wanted. They had no idea. Tomorrow they would find out. The morning arrived wrapped in soft gray light, the kind that filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows and promised a day of significance. Elaine had slept better than she expected, her dreams undisturbed by the weight of what she was about to do. She rose early, showered in the rainfall showerhead that cost more than most cars, and dressed with the careful intention of someone preparing for a board meeting. She chose a dove gray pantsuit today, soft, approachable, but undeniably powerful. Pearls at her ears and throat. Low heels that still added inches to her height. Minimal makeup, just enough to enhance what nature had already provided. When she looked in the mirror, she saw not just Elaine Hart, businesswoman, but Elaine Hart, owner of the Grand Chancellor Hotel, about to deliver a lesson in humility. The phone rang at exactly 8:30 a.m. "Good morning, Miss Hart," said a voice she recognized as Sandra's, the front desk manager from yesterday. "I'm calling to confirm that Mr. Harrison, our general manager, would be happy to meet with you this morning at 10:00 a.m. in the Magnolia Conference Room. He understands you wish to speak with the owner, but unfortunately the owner is unavailable. Mr. Harrison is confident he can address any concerns you might have." Elaine smiled at the phone. Of course the owner was unavailable. Of course they would send the general manager to handle the difficult guest. It was exactly what she had expected. "That will be fine," Elaine said. "I'll be there at 10:00. She hung up and allowed herself a small laugh. They had no idea, not the faintest clue. At 9:55 a.m., Elaine stepped off the elevator on the second floor, where the conference rooms were located. The hallway was quieter than the lobby, carpeted in a rich burgundy that absorbed sound, lined with abstract art that probably cost 5 figures per piece. At the end of the hall, she could see the entrance to the Magnolia Conference Room, its door slightly ajar. But it wasn't the conference room that caught her attention. It was the small cluster of staff members gathered near the water station at the opposite end of the hall. Brandon from the front desk stood with his arms crossed, whispering to Maya, the room service server from her first night. Sandra hovered nearby, pretending to check something on her clipboard but clearly listening. 2 housekeepers had somehow found reasons to be on this floor, their carts parked awkwardly against the wall. And there, at the edge of the group, stood the silver-haired clerk from the boutique shop, her reading glasses on a chain around her neck, her eyes fixed on Elaine with barely disguised curiosity. They had come to watch, to witness whatever confrontation was about to happen, to see the difficult black woman get politely dismissed by management. Elaine walked past them without acknowledgement, her heels silent on the thick carpet, her posture straight, her expression serene. She could feel their eyes on her back, could almost hear the thoughts racing through their minds. There she goes. Thinks she's important. Wait until Mr. Harrison handles her. She pushed open the door to the Magnolia conference room and stepped inside. The room was elegant in understated ways. A long mahogany table polished to a mirror shine, 8 leather chairs arranged with military precision, a single orchid in a ceramic pot at the center. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the hotel's interior courtyard, where fountains sparkled and guests lounged on wrought iron furniture. A man stood at the windows, his back to the door, apparently admiring the view. He turned when Elaine entered, and his face arranged itself into a smile of practiced welcome. "Ms. Hart," he said, crossing the room with his hand extended. "I'm Douglas Harrison, General Manager of the Grand Chancellor. Thank you for coming." He was perhaps 55, with the polished look of someone who had spent decades in luxury hospitality. Silver hair carefully styled, suit obviously bespoke, shoes that probably cost a month of most people's rent. His handshake was firm but brief, the kind designed to establish dominance without seeming aggressive. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Harrison," Elaine said, taking a seat at the table without waiting to be invited. She positioned herself at the head of the table, a small but deliberate choice that Harrison noted with a flicker of something in his eyes. He sat across from her, maintaining the distance that power dynamics demanded. "Sandra mentioned you wish to speak with the owner. I apologize that he's unavailable. Mr. Wellington travels extensively and rarely visits this property. But I assure you, I have full authority to address any concerns our guests might have." Elaine studied him for a moment. Mark Wellington, the previous owner, the man from whom she had purchased this hotel 6 months ago in a private transaction that had never been announced to staff or public. "I see," Elaine said. "And how long have you been general manager here, Mr. Harrison?" He seemed slightly thrown by the question but recovered quickly. 7 years next month. I was brought in by Mr. Wellington himself to elevate the property's standards." 7 years, Elaine repeated. "That's a long time." "You must know this hotel intimately." "I like to think so." Harrison leaned back in his chair, his confidence returning. "Every corner, every department, every staff member, I know what works here and what doesn't." Elaine nodded slowly. "Then you must also know there are problems." Harrison's smile tightened. "Every hotel has challenges, Ms. Hart. If you've experienced any issues during your stay, I want to hear about them. Was there something wrong with your suite, the room service, perhaps the boutique?" "Suite is beautiful," Elaine said. "The room service was prompt. The boutique has lovely merchandise." "Then I'm confused. What exactly is the concern?" Elaine let the silence stretch. She had learned this technique years ago in negotiations, the power of empty space, the discomfort it created, the way it forced the other person to fill it with something revealing. Harrison shifted in his chair. "Ms. Hart, the concern," Elaine said finally, "is not with the physical hotel, it's with the culture, the assumptions. The way certain guests are treated before they've had a chance to prove anything." Harrison's eyebrows rose. "I'm not sure I follow." "Let me be direct then." Elaine leaned forward slightly. "From the moment I arrived, I have been treated as someone who doesn't belong here. The receptionist hesitated to check me in. The room service server scanned my suite as if looking for evidence that I shouldn't be in it. Guests in the lobby stared and whispered. The boutique clerk felt the need to inform me that the scarf I wanted was quite expensive." Harrison's face had gone carefully neutral, the expression of a man trained to deflect complaints. "Ms. Hart, I apologize if any of our staff made you feel unwelcome. That's certainly not our intention. But I should point out that our staff are trained to be attentive to all guests, and sometimes that attention can be misinterpreted as misinterpreted. Elaine said the word flatly, letting it land like a stone in still water. I'm only saying that our staff deal with a wide variety of guests, and they're trained to verify details and ensure accuracy. It's not personal, it's protocol. Protocol, Elaine repeated. The protocol of hesitation. The protocol of scanning rooms for proof of belonging. The protocol of whispering about guests in the lobby. Harrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Ms. Hart, I understand you feel you've had a negative experience. I'm prepared to offer a partial refund, perhaps a complimentary night on your next visit. But I won't stand here and pretend our staff are something they're not. They're good people doing difficult jobs. I haven't accused them of being bad people, Elaine said calmly. I've accused them of being prejudiced. There's a difference. The word hung between them like smoke. Prejudiced. Harrison actually flinched. Now wait just a minute. You waited 7 years to become general manager, Elaine interrupted, her voice still calm but carrying an edge now. You waited through Mark Wellington's ownership, through countless staff changes, through who knows how many guests who walked through those doors and felt exactly what I felt. And in all that time, did you ever address it? Did you ever look at your staff and say, perhaps we should examine why we treat certain guests differently? Harrison stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I think this conversation is over. I've offered you compensation. I've apologized for any misunderstanding. If that's not sufficient, you're welcome to take your concerns elsewhere. Elaine didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. I appreciate the offer, she said quietly. But I'm not interested in compensation. I'm interested in change. And since you clearly can't authorize that, I need to speak with the owner. I told you Mr. Wellington is unavailable. I know. Elaine stood now, smoothing her jacket with deliberate calm. I know he's unavailable, but I also know that Mark Wellington no longer owns this hotel. Harrison froze. His mouth opened, then closed. He sold it 6 months ago, Elaine continued, walking slowly around the table toward him, to a holding company called Hart Enterprises, based in Atlanta, focused on acquiring luxury properties and transforming them into truly inclusive spaces. Harrison's face had gone pale. His eyes darted to the door, then back to Elaine, then to the door again. You might recognize the name, Elaine said, stopping directly in front of him. Hart Enterprises, named after its founder and CEO. She extended her hand. I'm Elaine Hart, and I own this hotel. The silence that followed was absolute. Outside the window, a fountain splashed softly. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang. But in the Magnolia conference room, Douglas Harrison stood frozen, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. You can't be, he stammered. I am. Elaine's voice was gentle now, almost kind. I've been watching, Douglas. For 2 days, I've been watching everything. The way your staff treats guests who don't fit their expectations. The way you dismiss legitimate concerns as misunderstandings. The way this hotel operates on assumptions rather than principles. Harrison sank back into his chair, his polished demeanor crumbling. Ms. Hart, if I had known. If you had known I was the owner, would you have treated me differently? Would you have listened more carefully? Would you have actually addressed the problem instead of offering compensation? Elaine shook her head slowly. That's exactly the point. You shouldn't need to know someone's status to treat them with dignity. She walked toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. "We're having a staff meeting tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. in the grand ballroom. Every single employee will be there, including you." She glanced back at him. "Changes are coming, Douglas, and they start now." She opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The cluster of staff members was still there, gathered near the water station, their faces a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed amusement. They had been waiting for the show, waiting to see the difficult guest get put in her place. Elaine walked past them slowly, letting them see her face, letting them wonder. Their expressions shifted as she passed, the amusement fading, the curiosity turning to confusion, the whispers dying on their lips. She reached the elevator and pressed the call button. Behind her, absolute silence. The doors opened. Elaine stepped inside, and as they slid closed, she allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Tomorrow they would all understand. The news spread through the Grand Chancellor Hotel like wildfire through dry grass. By noon, every staff member on every shift had heard some version of what had happened in the Magnolia conference room. By evening, the stories had grown tales, exaggerated, distorted, but all circling the same impossible truth. The black woman in the presidential suite owned the hotel. Brandon heard it first from Sandra, who had been lurking near the conference room door and caught enough of the conversation to piece together the truth. He spent the rest of his shift in a daze, replaying every moment of that first interaction. The hesitation, the double-checking, the flinch when their fingers touched. His stomach churned when he remembered the nervous laugh, the barely concealed dismissal in his voice when he said, "You've booked a suite with us." Maya heard it in the employee break room, where the news hit like a bomb. She had scanned that suite looking for proof that Elaine didn't belong. She had hesitated at the door, questioned with her eyes, reported back to her supervisor that something felt off about the woman in 1212. Now she sat with her cold coffee growing colder, wondering if she still had a job. The boutique clerk heard it from a housekeeper who had been polishing the banister on the second floor and seen everything. The clerk who had warned Elaine about the expensive scarf, who had followed her through the shop like a security guard, who had doubted that the black credit card was real until the transaction went through. She closed the shop early, claiming illness, and went home to sit in her dark apartment and think about the weight of assumptions. And Douglas Harrison, general manager of 7 years, sat alone in his office with the door closed and the lights off, staring at the wall and wondering how his career had ended in a single conversation. The staff meeting was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. in the grand ballroom. By 8:45, employees began filtering in, their faces a mixture of fear, curiosity, and something that looked almost like shame. Housekeepers in their uniforms, front desk staff in their blazers, kitchen workers still wearing aprons, bellhops, concierges, maintenance workers, servers, over 100 people who had built their lives around this hotel, now gathered to hear from the woman they had judged. The ballroom was magnificent, as ballrooms should be. Crystal chandeliers hung from a vaulted ceiling painted with scenes of clouds and cherubs. The floors were polished wood, gleaming under the lights. At the front of the room, a podium had been set up with the hotel's logo, a stylized chancellor's seal, projected onto a large screen behind it. Rows of chairs had been arranged in neat lines, but few people sat. Instead, they clustered in groups, whispering, speculating, stealing glances at the door. "What do you think she's going to do? Fire half the staff, probably. Brandon looks like he's going to be sick. Can you blame him? I heard he practically accused her of stealing the room. I heard she's worth like $50 million. I heard she owns 12 hotels. The rumors flew until, at exactly 9:00 a.m., the side door opened and Elaine Hart walked in. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a powerful crimson dress that commanded attention without shouting for it, a single strand of pearls at her throat, heels that clicked against the wood floor with the authority of a gavel. Behind her walked Douglas Harrison, his face pale, his posture defeated. Behind him came Sandra, the front desk manager, her sharp features arranged in an expression of careful neutrality. The room fell silent instantly. You could have heard a pin drop in that cavernous space. Elaine walked to the podium, her steps unhurried, her gaze sweeping across the assembled staff. She made eye contact with Brandon, who looked away immediately, with Maya, who seemed to shrink in her chair, with the boutique clerk who had apparently decided to attend after all and sat in the back row, her silver head bowed. When Elaine reached the podium, she didn't speak immediately. She let the silence stretch, let them feel the weight of it, let them sit with their own thoughts and fears and regrets. It was the same technique she had used on Harrison in the conference room, the power of empty space, the discomfort it created, the way it forced people to confront what they had done. Finally, she spoke. "Good morning. I'm Elaine Hart, and I own this hotel." The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples of reaction spread through the room, sharp intakes of breath, exchanged glances, bodies shifting in chairs. "I've chosen to remain anonymous since purchasing this establishment 6 months ago. I wanted to see it operate organically without the influence of my presence. I wanted to experience what our guests experience, to understand this hotel the way they understand it." She paused, letting that sink in. "What I experienced was troubling." The room seemed to hold its breath. Elaine's voice remained calm, measured, but there was steel beneath it. "From the moment I walked through those doors, I was treated as someone who didn't belong. The receptionist hesitated to check me in. The room service server scanned my suite for evidence that I shouldn't be there. Guests in the lobby stared and whispered. A clerk in our boutique felt the need to inform me that the scarf I wanted was expensive, as if I couldn't see the price tag myself." She looked directly at Brandon, who had gone the color of old parchment. "These are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a deeper problem, a culture of exclusion that has taken root in this hotel. A culture where certain guests are judged before they speak, where assumptions replace welcome, where dignity is distributed based on appearance rather than deserved by all." Maya wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. The boutique clerk sat frozen, her face a mask of shame. "I didn't come here to shame individuals," Elaine continued. "I came here to change a system. Because here's the truth that everyone in this room needs to understand. Hospitality is not just about clean rooms and good food. Hospitality is about making every single person who walks through those doors feel valued, feel welcome, feel like they belong." Her voice rose slightly, carrying across the vast room. "That is not happening here, and that ends today." She gestured toward the screen behind her, where the hotel's logo faded to be replaced by a series of bullet points. "Effective immediately, we are implementing the following changes. First, comprehensive training for every single employee, from housekeeping to management, on inclusion, respect, and unconscious bias. This is not optional. This is not a one-time seminar. This will be ongoing, continuous, embedded in everything we do." The staff exchanged glances. Some nodded slowly. Others looked skeptical but said nothing. Second, I'm establishing an anonymous feedback system for both guests and staff. If you experience or witness discrimination, you can report it without fear of retaliation. If you have ideas for making this hotel more welcoming, you can share them without worrying about your position. This hotel belongs to all of us, and all of us have a stake in its success. She clicked to the next slide. Third, we're creating a diversity committee composed of staff members from every department. This committee will meet monthly with senior management to review our progress, address concerns, and ensure that inclusion isn't just a policy but a practice. Applications will be available by the end of this week. The room had shifted. The fear was still there, but something else was growing alongside it, something that looked almost like hope. "I'm not here to fire people," Elaine said, and a visible wave of relief passed through the crowd. "I'm here to change behavior. I'm here to build something better. But let me be absolutely clear. If you cannot treat every guest with dignity, regardless of their race, their appearance, their age, or any other characteristic, then this is not the place for you. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for effort. I'm asking for growth. I'm asking for change." She stepped out from behind the podium, walking to the edge of the small stage closer to the staff. "I know change is hard. I know it's uncomfortable. I know that many of you have worked in this industry for years, maybe decades, and you've learned certain habits, certain ways of seeing people. But here's the thing about habits: they can be unlearned. Biases can be confronted. Assumptions can be questioned." Her voice softened. "I've faced situations like this my entire life. I've been the person who doesn't belong, the person who gets judged, the person who has to work twice as hard to be seen as half as worthy. And I made a choice a long time ago. Instead of letting that make me bitter, I let it make me purposeful. I built an empire not despite those experiences, but because of them. Because I know what it feels like to be on the outside looking in, and I decided to spend my life building places where no one has to feel that way." A housekeeper in the third row began to clap, slowly at first, then with more conviction. Others joined. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding, hesitant at first, then stronger, then with the kind of energy that fills a space and changes everything. Brandon was clapping. Maya was clapping, tears streaming down her face. The boutique clerk sat frozen for a moment, then slowly, reluctantly, brought her hands together. Elaine raised a hand and the applause faded. "One more thing," she said. "I didn't come here to demand perfection. I came here to demand effort. Growth is messy. Mistakes will happen. What matters is how we learn from them and move forward. If you're willing to do that work, you have a place here. If you're not," she shrugged slightly, "the door is that way." She pointed toward the ballroom entrance. No one moved. "Good," Elaine said softly. "Then let's get to work." She stepped away from the edge of the stage and walked toward the side door. As she passed Douglas Harrison, she paused. "Douglas, I'd like to see you in my office in an hour. We have a lot to discuss." He nodded, his expression humble in a way it had never been before. "Yes, Ms. Hart, I'll be there." Elaine walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind a room full of people who would never be quite the same. The applause started again as the door closed behind her, spontaneous, genuine, filling the grand space with something that felt almost like redemption. But Elaine wasn't finished yet. This was just one hotel, one property, one small corner of an empire that spanned 3 continents. The work here was just beginning, and there were 11 more hotels waiting for the same transformation. She walked through the quiet hallway toward the elevator, her heels clicking against the marble, her mind already racing with plans and possibilities. Behind her, in the ballroom, a new chapter was beginning for the Grand Chancellor Hotel, and Elaine Hart was just getting started. 3 months had passed since the staff meeting that changed everything at the Grand Chancellor Hotel. Spring had arrived in full force, painting the city in shades of green and gold, and the hotel seemed to have transformed along with the season. Elaine stood at the window of her suite, the same suite where she had ordered room service that first night, where she had watched the city lights and wondered if change was possible. Below her, the lobby bustled with activity. Guests checked in and out. Bellhops carried luggage. The coffee bar hummed with conversation. But something was different now. Something fundamental had shifted in the heart of this place. The anonymous feedback system had been operational for 10 weeks. In that time, over 40 submissions had come in, some from guests praising the new atmosphere, some from staff reporting concerns, some simply offering ideas for improvement. Every single one had been reviewed, addressed, and logged. Elaine had read them all personally. The diversity committee had met 6 times. Representatives from every department gathered monthly in the Magnolia Conference Room, the same room where Elaine had revealed herself to Douglas Harrison, to discuss progress, challenges, and next steps. Brandon had volunteered for the committee, so had Maya. Even the boutique clerk whose name Elaine had learned was Margaret had attended the last 2 meetings, though she spoke little and listened much. And the training, hours and hours of training, unconscious bias workshops, cultural competency seminars, role-playing exercises where staff practiced difficult conversations and examined their own assumptions. Some employees had grumbled, a few had left, but most had stayed and most had grown. On this particular morning, Elaine had requested something unusual, a meeting with the staff members who had been present during her first visit. Not a disciplinary meeting, not a review, just a conversation. They gathered in the coffee bar, Brandon, Maya, Margaret, Sandra, and a few others who had been part of those first interactions. They sat at a large round table near the window, the same window where Elaine had sipped her cappuccino and watched guests stare at her 3 months ago. Coffee steamed in ceramic cups. Pastries sat untouched on a platter. The atmosphere was nervous but not fearful. Elaine arrived exactly on time as always. She wore a soft blue blouse today, open at the collar, no jacket, no obvious status markers. She smiled as she approached the table, and something in that smile put them at ease. "Thank you all for coming," she said, taking a seat among them rather than at the head of the table. "I wanted to talk today not as your owner, but as someone who shares this space with you, someone who wants to understand your experience of the changes we've made." They exchanged glances. Brandon cleared his throat. "Ms. Hart, I want to apologize again for that first day, for how I treated you." Elaine shook her head gently. "Brandon, you've apologized 6 times in the last 3 months. I've accepted every single one. You're on the diversity committee now. You're part of the solution. Let's focus on that." He nodded, relief visible on his young face. Maya spoke next, her voice soft but steady. "The training has been hard, not the classes themselves, but what they made me see about myself. I didn't think I was prejudiced. I've never said a racist thing in my life. But when you talked about scanning your suite looking for proof that you belonged, I realized I do that, with guests who don't look like the ones I'm used to. And now, Elaine asked, now I catch myself every time I notice the thought and I stop it. I ask myself why I'm thinking it. And then I treat the person in front of me like they're the only guest in the hotel. Maya smiled slightly. It's exhausting sometimes, but it's right. Margaret, the boutique clerk, had been silent, her eyes fixed on her coffee cup. Elaine waited, giving her space. Finally, the older woman looked up. I've worked in luxury retail for 40 years, Margaret said. 40 years I've waited on celebrities and CEOs and royalty. And in all that time I thought I was just careful, vigilant, protecting the store from people who might steal or cause trouble. Her voice cracked slightly. I didn't see that my careful looked different for different people. I didn't see that I followed black customers and left white customers alone. I didn't see it. She wiped at her eyes with a napkin. That day in the shop when you reached for that scarf, I didn't just tell you it was expensive. I positioned myself to watch you, to follow you. I would never have done that to a white woman in a designer suit. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I'm so ashamed. Elaine reached across the table and touched Margaret's hand. The shame isn't the point. The awareness is. You're here, you're talking about it, you're changing, that's everything. Sandra, the front desk manager who had once performed wellness checks on guests who didn't fit the mold, leaned forward. The feedback system has been eye-opening, Ms. Hart. We've had reports we never would have received before. Things staff were afraid to say. Things guests didn't think we'd care about. Like what? Like the housekeeper who noticed we never had black guests in the presidential suite until you arrived. She'd been here 5 years and never said anything because she didn't think anyone would listen. Sandra shook her head. We're listening now. The conversation continued for another hour. They talked about successes and struggles, about moments of pride and moments of failure. They talked about guests who had noticed the change and commented on it. They talked about staff who had resisted and eventually come around. They talked about the future, what else could be done, what still needed improvement. When the meeting ended, Elaine stood and looked at each of them in turn. 3 months ago, I walked into this hotel and felt invisible, judged, dismissed. Today, I sit here with people who see me, who see each other, who are doing the hard work of becoming better. Her voice was thick with emotion. This is why I do what I do, not for the money, not for the power, for moments like this, for proof that change is possible. Brandon stood and to everyone's surprise hugged her. Maya joined. Soon they were all gathered in a loose embrace, laughing and crying at the same time. That evening, Elaine returned to her suite one last time. She was checking out in the morning, flying to Chicago to visit another property, another hotel that needed the same transformation. The work was never done. There were always more battles to fight, more minds to change, more walls to tear down. She stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled over the skyline. Behind her, the suite was packed and ready. In front of her, the world stretched out in all its complicated, beautiful, broken glory. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. Chicago property reports for the quarter are in your email. Also, the diversity committee at the Atlanta hotel wants to schedule a video call. They've started a mentorship program for young staff and want your input. Elaine smiled and typed back, tell them I'll call tomorrow afternoon, and send flowers to the Grand Chancellor staff, something for the break room. They've earned it. She slipped the phone into her pocket and looked out at the city one last time. The Grand Chancellor Hotel had been her test case, her experiment in whether real change was possible. And it was, not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely, deeply, transformatively possible. As she turned away from the window, Elaine thought about all the hotels that still waited for her, all the staff who needed to be seen, all the guests who would walk through doors and wonder if they belonged. She was ready for them, all of them. The next morning, Elaine checked out to find Brandon at the front desk. His smile was genuine now, reaching his eyes in a way it hadn't 3 months ago. "Good morning, Miss Hart. It's been an honor having you here. We hope to see you again soon." Elaine returned the smile. "I'm sure you will, and Brandon. Yes, keep growing, keep learning, keep being the person you're becoming." He nodded, his eyes bright. "I will, I promise." She walked through the lobby one last time, past the marble floors and towering columns, past the coffee bar where she had sipped her cappuccino, past the boutique where Margaret was helping a customer with genuine warmth. The automatic doors slid open, releasing her into the cool morning air. The city stretched before her, full of possibility. Elaine Hart took a deep breath and stepped into it, carrying with her the belief that dignity and respect should be non-negotiable, not just in her hotels but everywhere. Her story is a reminder that change often begins with one person willing to stand firm, speak up, and lead with grace. It challenges us all to confront our own biases, to be better, and to demand better, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. So the next time you encounter a moment of prejudice or unfairness, ask yourself, how can I choose grace? How can I make a difference? Together, we can build a world where dignity isn't a privilege, it's a right.